My wife packed 2 suitcases while I stood in our bedroom doorway, watching 7 years of marriage fold itself into carefully chosen belongings. "Julian can give me everything you never could," she said, not even looking up. "I'm sorry, Desmond, but I'm choosing a different life now." She left that same afternoon, moving into her billionaire ex-boyfriend's penthouse across the city. 3 weeks later, Julian himself showed up at my apartment door, and instead of gloating, he asked me for something I never expected to hear from the man who'd just taken my wife. "My name is Desmond Okafor. I'm 35, living in Chicago, Illinois, married to Priya for 7 years before that afternoon changed everything. Julian Castellan, her college boyfriend before we met, had built a technology empire worth hundreds of millions over the past decade, remaining peripherally connected to Priya through occasional professional overlap in Chicago's business circles. If you're already curious where a story like this possibly goes, stay with me. Because what Julian actually wanted from me that day completely reshaped everything I thought I understood about what had happened to my marriage. I opened my apartment door expecting anger, expecting some confrontation about my failed marriage, finding instead Julian standing there looking genuinely uncomfortable. Nothing like the confident business mogul I'd seen photographed in countless magazine profiles. "I need 5 minutes, Julian said. "Please." I let him in, mostly because I needed answers more than I needed to maintain any dignity about refusing to speak with the man Priya had left me for. "I assume you are here to explain why my wife suddenly decided our marriage wasn't worth continuing," I said, sitting across from him in my now noticeably empty living room. "Actually," Julian said, "I'm here because I need your help with something, and I recognize how strange that request probably sounds given the circumstances." "Strange doesn't begin to cover it," I said. "What could you possibly need from me?" Julian took a deep breath. "Priya isn't well, Desmond. Not physically unwell, but something's happening with her decision-making that concerns me deeply. And I think you're the only person who might actually understand what's driving it." I felt my chest tighten with confusion and residual hurt. "She left me for you 3 weeks ago, seemingly quite decisively. What exactly concerns you about her decision-making now?" "Because this isn't the first time," Julian said. "6 years ago, right after you and Priya got married, she reached out to me suddenly, said she'd made a terrible mistake marrying you, asked if we could reconnect romantically. I refused, telling her marriage deserved genuine commitment, not impulsive reconsideration. This revelation hit me like a physical blow. She tried to leave me for you 6 years ago, right after our wedding. I never told you because I assumed it was simply pre-wedding anxiety resolving itself naturally," Julian said. "But 3 weeks ago, when she showed up at my office suddenly, declaring her love, insisting she'd finally chosen the life she truly wanted, I recognized the same desperate energy from 6 years earlier, except this time, I made the mistake of actually engaging with it instead of redirecting her back toward you." I sat there, processing information that fundamentally recontextualized not just recent events, but potentially years of unexplained anxiety and restlessness I'd witnessed in Priya without ever understanding its source. "What exactly are you asking me for?" I said. "I need you to help me understand what's actually happening with her psychologically," Julian said. "Because since she moved in 3 weeks ago, her behavior has become increasingly erratic, compulsive spending, disappearing for hours without explanation, extreme mood swings between euphoric excitement and devastating despair. I'm genuinely concerned this isn't really about choosing between us romantically. I think something more serious might be happening. I want to pause the story right here because I know this is taking an unexpected direction, and I think it's worth asking yourselves honestly. If your ex-spouse's new partner came to you concerned about mental health rather than gloating about winning, would you even consider helping? While you think about that, please subscribe if this story has you as invested as I was standing there that afternoon, because what we discovered together over the following weeks changed everything about how I understood my entire marriage. "Are you asking me to help my ex-wife who left me for you 3 weeks ago?" I asked, needing clarity despite the surreal nature of this entire conversation. "I'm asking you to help someone who might genuinely be in crisis," Julian said. "Regardless of our complicated history, I don't think either of us wants to see Priya spiral into something dangerous without understanding why." Reluctantly, cautiously, I agreed to at least gather information before deciding how to proceed. Over the following week, Julian shared concerning details: Priya's compulsive purchases totaling nearly $200,000 in just 3 weeks, disappearing overnight without explanation, increasingly paranoid statements about people watching or judging her decisions. I contacted Priya's sister, Anjali, someone I'd remained close with despite the divorce proceedings now underway, asking carefully whether she'd noticed similar patterns previously. "Desmond, I've been meaning to call you," Anjali said, her voice heavy with concern. "Our mother had bipolar disorder, diagnosed when Priya was 16. I always worried Priya might develop similar symptoms eventually. Especially given how dramatically her behavior shifts during high-stress periods, this revelation connected pieces I'd never fully understood throughout 7 years of marriage. Priya's periodic weeks of intense energy and impulsive decision-making, followed by devastating depressive episodes she'd always attributed to work stress or seasonal changes. "Why didn't you ever mention this family history?" I asked. "Priya made me promise never to tell you," Anjali admitted. She was terrified you'd see her differently. Terrified of being defined by our mother's diagnosis before she'd even determined whether she'd developed similar symptoms herself. I brought this information to Julian, both of us now recognizing that Priya's dramatic decision to leave our marriage might represent something considerably more complicated than simple romantic reconsideration. "I think we need to approach her together," Julian said, not confronting her about choosing between us, but genuinely expressing concern about what might actually be happening with her mental health. We arranged to meet Priya together at a neutral location, a private conference room at Julian's office building, both of us nervous about how she might receive concern that could easily be misinterpreted as controlling or dismissive of her autonomous decisions. Priya arrived looking exhausted, dark circles beneath her eyes despite expensive concealer, her earlier confident declaration of choosing a new life replaced by visible fragility she was clearly struggling to hide. "Why are you both here together?" she asked, immediately defensive. "Is this some kind of intervention?" "We're concerned about you," I said carefully. "Not about your romantic choices specifically, but about patterns we both noticed that seem inconsistent with your usual decision-making." Priya's defensiveness cracked slightly. "What patterns?" "The spending," Julian said gently. "The disappearing overnight. The extreme mood shifts I've witnessed these past 3 weeks." Tears formed in Priya's eyes rapidly. "I don't know what's happening to me," she admitted, voice breaking completely. "Some days I feel invincible, like I can do anything, make any decision instantly and completely. Other days I can barely get out of bed, terrified I've destroyed everything meaningful in my life through decisions I don't even remember making clearly." I gently shared what Anjali had revealed about their mother's bipolar diagnosis, watching Priya's face shift from confusion to devastating recognition. "I've been so terrified of becoming her," Priya whispered. "I think I've spent years pretending everything was fine, specifically because acknowledging any symptoms felt like admitting I might actually be developing the same condition that made my childhood so unpredictable and painful." That conversation marked the beginning of Priya finally seeking proper psychiatric evaluation, ultimately receiving a bipolar disorder diagnosis that explained not just her dramatic decision 3 weeks earlier, but years of unexplained emotional volatility throughout our marriage that we both misattributed to external stress rather than an underlying psychiatric condition. "I need you both to understand something," Priya said during a difficult conversation several weeks into her treatment. Leaving Desmond wasn't really a rational choice based on Julian offering a better life. It was a manic episode convincing me that dramatic, impulsive change would somehow resolve the internal chaos I'd been experiencing for months without understanding its actual source. Julian, to his credit, remained supportive throughout Priya's diagnostic process despite the complicated position he occupied, eventually acknowledging that romantic involvement with someone actively experiencing a manic episode had been ethically questionable, regardless of his own feelings. "I should have recognized the signs earlier," Julian told me privately, weeks into Priya's treatment. Instead, I allowed myself to believe her sudden declaration of love was simply genuine reconsideration rather than symptoms of a serious psychiatric condition. As Priya's treatment progressed, medication and therapy gradually stabilizing the extreme mood fluctuations that had characterized recent months, she began processing what her manic episode had actually cost her. Our marriage, technically still legally intact though emotionally devastated, alongside significant financial consequences from compulsive spending during her episode. "I don't expect you to simply forgive what happened," Priya told me during one particularly difficult conversation 4 months after that initial confrontation. But I need you to understand that leaving wasn't really me making a conscious choice about our marriage. It was an illness, making choices I wouldn't have made in any rational state of mind. I spent considerable time processing this complicated situation myself, working with my own therapist to understand how to hold both genuine hurt about our marriage's ending, alongside compassion for an illness that had apparently influenced Priya's decision more significantly than either of us initially recognized. I think I need to acknowledge something difficult, I told my therapist during one session. Part of me wants to simply forgive everything immediately because I understand now it was illness-driven. But another part of me recognizes that regardless of underlying cause, our marriage still ended and I'm allowed to grieve that loss even while understanding its complicated origin. Priya and I ultimately proceeded with divorce, both of us recognizing that regardless of the psychiatric explanation for her decision, rebuilding trust and partnership after such a dramatic rupture would require more than simply understanding its underlying cause. However, our divorce proceeded with considerably more compassion and cooperation than typically characterizes such situations. Both of us prioritizing Priya's continued stability and treatment over adversarial legal proceedings. Julian, understanding the ethical complexity of his own role in this situation, stepped back from romantic involvement with Priya entirely, instead helping fund her ongoing psychiatric treatment and providing financial support during her recovery period without expecting or pursuing any romantic relationship in return. I think I needed to make amends for not recognizing what was actually happening, Julian told me during our final conversation about the entire situation. Supporting her treatment isn't about pursuing any future relationship. It's about taking responsibility for my own role in not recognizing genuine crisis when I encountered it. 18 months after that initial devastating afternoon when Priya packed her suitcases, our divorce finalized amicably, both of us having worked extensively with therapists to process everything that had unfolded. Priya, now stable on appropriate medication with consistent therapy support, reached out to me directly during our divorce's final stages. "I know I can't undo what happened," she said, "but I need you to know that working through this diagnosis, understanding finally why I'd experienced such unpredictable emotional patterns throughout our entire marriage, has given me clarity I never had access to previously. I'm genuinely grateful for how compassionately both you and Julian ultimately handled discovering what was actually happening, rather than simply treating my departure as unforgivable betrayal. I've since started dating again, carrying forward considerably more awareness about recognizing warning signs of mental health crises within relationships, understanding now how easily dramatic behavioral changes can be misattributed to simple relationship dissatisfaction rather than underlying psychiatric conditions requiring genuine medical attention. I think often about that afternoon when Julian first appeared at my door, about how easily I could have simply refused engagement entirely, allowing pride and hurt to prevent discovering what was actually happening with Priya's mental health. If Julian hadn't approached me with genuine concern rather than triumphant gloating, if I hadn't set aside my own hurt long enough to investigate his concerns seriously, Priya's bipolar disorder might have remained undiagnosed considerably longer, potentially leading to significantly more devastating consequences. If you've ever witnessed dramatic, seemingly inexplicable behavioral changes in someone you love, I hope this story reminds you of something important. Sometimes, what appears to be simple betrayal or poor decision-making actually represents underlying mental health struggles requiring genuine compassion and medical attention rather than pure judgment. Setting aside personal hurt long enough to investigate concerning patterns, even when doing so feels counterintuitive given immediate circumstances, can sometimes reveal crucial truths that transform how we understand entire relationships and the people we love within them. Real compassion sometimes requires setting aside justified personal pain long enough to recognize when someone we love, even someone whose recent actions have deeply hurt us, might actually be struggling with something considerably more complicated than simple poor judgment or betrayal.